Good morning, educators. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. As stated, my name is Eugenia Floyd, and I'm a fourth grade teacher from Mary Scroggs Elementary School out of the Chapel Hill Carborough City Schools and the 2021 Burroughs Wellcome Fund North Carolina Teacher of the Year. It has been an honor to advocate on behalf of the 1.5 million students in North Carolina public schools and the thousands of educators that serve them. I'm so excited to welcome you all to the 2022 North Carolina Beginning Teacher Summit. Next slide. I would also like to take a brief moment to thank you for choosing education. Whether you're joining us because you're going to begin your very first year in August, or you're going into your second or third year as an as an educator, or you could be just coming to visit us today because you want to grow as an educator. I want to be the first to thank you for making the choice to serve children. And just to be clear, when we are in the roles of educators, that means that our sole job is to work on behalf of children. The kids are who we work for. So thank you so much for choosing this fantastic career, the one profession that creates all other professions. Next slide. This year's 2022 Beginning Teacher Summit has a theme of reaching for the stars. Now, when I saw this theme pop up in my email, I fell completely in love with it. One of my first thoughts about this was that it is most definitely something that I would tell my kids every day. I want my kids to reach for the stars. I want them to know that there are no limitations for what they can be inside my classroom and beyond. So it makes sense that this same thought, reaching for the stars, can apply to educators. And it should. We should never ask kids to do things that we're not willing to do. We too need to reach for the stars for our students. And yes, we're reaching for the stars for the kids that we serve because we would not have jobs, we would not be here without them. So, how do we as educators reach for the stars? I got an answer for you, and it's pretty basic. In order to reach for the stars in the profession of education, you have to, next slide, go to class. You have to be in class. And when I'm talking about being in class, I'm not just saying that you should participate in the wonderful summit sessions, even though you should. I'm actually saying that you have to go deeper and do more than just show up. So, what does this mean? Next slide. As educators, reaching for the stars means we check ourselves daily. And most of the time, we check ourselves more than once a day. Checking yourselves means that you know how to show up, how you show up in a space. Checking yourself means that you acknowledge the fact that you bring all of who you are into the classroom. You bring your likes, you bring your dislikes, you bring your beliefs, you bring your ideas. And you may even bring that deep obsession that you have with your favorite music artist, like me, Bruno Mars. And he might be listening now. That's why I wanted to point that out. But because of that, because of my love for that, his music, I would play the instrumental version of his songs as my kids are making their way into the classroom. Some of you bring your interests. You bring your love for Carolina or Duke or NC State, and you bring those brackets into the classroom to engage students in math or literacy or any other subject during March Madness. More importantly, we bring with us our own ideas of what is respectful and also what's disrespectful behavior. And we know that that could be defined differently by many. Yet it always shows up on our school data. This is why we have to check ourselves. We have to make sure that we are clear about who we are and what we bring into the classrooms. The students have to spend 180 days with you. And no, I didn't have that my students listening to Bruno Mars instrumentals for 180 days because I wouldn't want to force that on anyone. I don't want to force my ideas and my beliefs solely on my students. But we'll dive further into that in a moment. Our next part of this work is that we are in the business of reaching for the stars when we are constantly learning. We are constantly learning about our students, and we're also learning from our students. And most importantly, we're constantly learning how to be better at working for children. In this job, growing in our craft is essential to our students. Now, I've taught for 8 years, and before teaching, I was a teacher assistant. And I learned something new, whether it's a new way to support learning with a new curriculum, or I might learn a new strategy or a way to communicate with my families. I might learn a new way to support my colleagues as often as I can. And we have to be open and ready to receive the learning from anywhere. Sometimes it's from students telling you how they learn best. Sometimes it could be a member of your PLC. Sometimes it's a coach, a principal, and sometimes I can even learn from a tweet or another social media post. Teaching is your craft, and growing in it is your responsibility and duty for the children that you work for. That's why you all are all here at this summit today. Our next way of showing up is educators are always reaching for the stars when we advocate for the needs of our students. Now, I'm not saying that it's your job to go to every single board meeting or call up every House and Senate member. What I am saying is that you are an advocate for your students when you notice their needs and also the interests that they have. My first year teaching, I had a strong and very big feeling that I had no clue what I was doing. I had little to no confidence in the actual instruction that I was providing. So I asked for help. I asked the math coaches, reading coaches, and gifted specialists, EC teachers, and members of my PLC to just stop by and watch me teach. This was my way of advocating for my kids. I had to be better so that they could get the education that they deserve. And sometimes that advocacy looks different. We advocate for our kids by connecting with our families. Sometimes we advocate by connecting with the school nurse, counselors, and social workers. Teachers are usually the first to notice things going on with our kids, and sometimes our kids come to us first. And it's up to us to make sure that we put them in front of the right resources. That is how we advocate for our children. Next slide. Educators also reach for the stars when we see our students. Earlier, we talked about how we have to check ourselves and we have to recognize how we show up in spaces and all the things that we bring with us. As educators, we also have to see how our students show up and all that they bring with them. We all know the importance of building authentic relationships with our students. And we know that these relationships bring out feelings of care and comfort to many of our students that we serve. And that's great. I think it's also important for us to remember that it isn't just about building the relationships with our students because we care about them. We're also doing that so that we can connect them to the learning and to the world around them to support them in reaching for the stars. As a fourth grade teacher, when I truly see my students, I'm not just preparing them to go to fifth grade. I'm also preparing them for the time beyond the walls of a classroom. I'm preparing them for a time after graduation. True care, true relationships built with students doesn't have to exclude high expectation. I expect kids to leave my classroom being great at whatever they choose to do. And being great also doesn't necessarily tie to a performance score. When we see our students, when we acknowledge the truth of how the world may or may not see our students as well, we're able to give them strength and appropriate tools for success beyond our classrooms. And lastly, as educators continuing to reach for the stars, we do all of it in service to children. Long ago, before I became a teacher, I actually worked in a restaurant waiting tables. I did this through undergraduate school, and I did this also while I was getting my teaching license. I also remember a time in high school where I would do community service projects with the clubs that I was involved in. And the one thing that I fully remember in both of those jobs, whether it was to the service of my community or as a waitress, it was never, the work I did was never about me. It was about the people that I was serving. When it comes to the job of teaching, it is about children. It is about the children in my classroom. Now, just like waiting tables or working in community service at times, it can be a job that it can be sad sometimes, it can be frustrating, but it never stopped me from serving. This happens in the classroom too. Sometimes when I waited tables, there was a tray that was just fully heavy, full of food and drinks and all the things that needed, and your feet were hurting. And all of this would happen, and you would be uncomfortable. Even when I served my community and we were cleaning up yards and there was a snake in the yard, I felt major discomfort and fear. But I continued to serve. I say all this to say that we always got to remember that sometimes that discomfort about a lesson or a task that we need to make sure our children complete, sometimes that might be the one thing that inspires a child to become a teacher. It might inspire them to become a scientist. It might inspire them to become the next governor or president. We're in the business of serving children. Next slide. So, as you all continue your session today, remember to go to class so that you can reach for the stars for your children. Next slide. Thank you all so much for allowing me to speak. I have left my contact information for you. Please reach out if you need anything from myself, as well as the 2021 Regional Teachers of the Year teams. I would also like to thank so much our regional education facilitators for all that they've done to create a wonderful event today. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful day.